G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day and so far a fantastic week. We're halfway through the working week. So today, as always, we do have a lot to go over and I'm actually going to show you, as always, messages directly from the front from people that I know, people that I met while I was in Ukraine both before and during the war. And as always, I present these verbatim so you can interpret what it is saying yourself, and there's no sort of secondhand information through myself. Sometimes I can't do that exactly, but I'll try my very best, and today we'll be doing that, talking about areas in the front line and some command decisions made as well. So what we need to talk over today, of course, we need to look at the maps, specifically Pokrovsk and Kursk. We'll talk about Mongolia. We'll talk about the massive dismissals happening in the Ukrainian government currently, and then of course we need to look at these large strikes that have occurred in Ukraine and look over some footage and what has occurred there. Now, what I will say is, as I'm filming this now, there are reports and the air raid sirens are active over Ukraine for both drones and ballistic missiles being fired in. So at least 50 people have been killed and over 270 have been wounded when Russian Iskander missiles have struck and then double tapped the Military Institute of Communications in Poltava, and there are also reports of damage to a nearby hospital as well. So let's look at this and let's look at what has then occurred here in Poltava. Now, I can't show you much, if any, of the footage destruction of this. Again, Telegram, or I'm sure you can find it on Twitter or Telegram yourself if you'd like to see, but we see just a massive amount of destruction that has occurred at this facility. Now, there is some questioning over what is this facility. Well, this is the Military Institute of Communications. That is being confirmed as well through Ukrainian journalist pages as well. Missile strike on Military Institute of Communications and a building nearby Poltava. Then talks about there needs to be an investigation of this, but not just a statement. There needs to be then actions taken and justice for negligence that has made this occur. And this is something I'm seeing more and more, is people looking actually more inwardly and going, how is the senior level of command having these same problems? And it never seems like justice then comes. I'm seeing a lot of that. Now, let's have a look on the map and have a look at where this area is. So this is the geolocation as well. And you can see there's a museum of the Signal Corps here as well. And then this building, that is the education center, as well as like a parade square off here too. So just to double confirm what this actually is, if we just jump onto Google Street View, we can zoom in on this sign out the front. And I've got this geolocated. That is the 179th United Education and Training Center for the Union of Armed Forces of Ukraine. So the idea when people say this is an education center, yes, it is. It's a training and education center, but it is military. It's being used a lot in a very misleading way. This is not a hit on a primary school. This is a military education center. And I would say the exact same if it was a Ukrainian strike against a Russian military education center training area, that in warfare, these strikes can and will happen. So let's look over what has then occurred and what has also been said. Ukrainian land forces military personnel have been killed. This is from Reuters. They did not specify how many victims were from the armed forces, but the attack was a major blow to Kyiv as it tries to bolster its ranks to hold off a more powerful enemy. The Land Forces Command is conducting an investigation to determine whether enough was done to protect the lives and health of the soldiers at the facility. Now, Zelensky on Telegram has said this as well. The Russian scum will surely pay for this strike. We continue to urge everyone in the world who has the power to stop this terror. Ukraine needs air defense systems and missiles now, not sitting in storage. Long-range strikes that can protect us from Russian terror are needed now, not later. Every day of delay, unfortunately, means more lives lost. And I will say the claims of the hospital being damaged and or hit, I don't have any photographs or information like I do of this facility being hit then either. So he speaks of longer range strikes, air defense systems. This is something we see Zelensky again and again saying that's what Ukraine needs. And we can see that the air defense in areas we've seen far more strikes than recently. Now, this is being talked about today as well. The JASM strike range, that the Joint Air Surface Standoff Missile, could enable Ukraine to hit targets 300 k's inside Russia including at least 30 air bases, some of which Russia uses to launch attacks. And they're saying that the US is talking about approval of this. The other thing I've seen is, though, even if approved, to sort out the logistics, the training, everything behind this would still take several months. But again, 300 kilometers of range here. This is not going to hit those long-range strategic bombers. Remember, they can fly at supersonic speeds. A lot of range is not their issue. They can also carry a lot of fuel. And how many of these will Ukraine actually be given? We have seen Ukraine have a massive shortage of weapons as well. Again, I'm not some military strategist. I'm not making the decisions, but it just seems to me that mass amount of drones to just overwhelm air defense and get that 1,000, 1,500 Ks in has been successful before. The counter for it is not that fantastic. That's where I would be looking at domestically produced long-range drone, but we'll see if these do get approved and then how long it may take for them to be seen. So we've spoken about a new fab, a new UMPK glide bomb. They do glide, but it does have some control from onboard systems as well. That the range has been increased. Now, this has been going around Russian pages here. Of course, what this is actually showing, if we look at this infographic, is a Su-34 jet, but you can see pictures of strikes on Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. Of course, showing that this is where they intend to have these strikes next. Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, these are the areas out of Bakhmut, Avdiivka, Donbass, these major hubs there as well. Now, what they're saying in this is the traditional FAB 40 to 60K range claimed, then the updated at 75 to 85 kilometers of range. Now, what is this for? Well, it's all to get that aircraft out of the danger zone. Aircraft danger zone? Didn't actually mean to do that. But the further back those aircraft can launch it, the less time that they are going to be in engagement distance for the systems to hit the aircraft. With the FABs, you need to hit the aircraft, not the FAB in the air, at least to make that the amount, again, worth it, because the aircraft can fire multiple of these and can do mission on mission. So we are seeing that, and it's interesting to show that Sloviansk, Kramatorsk here as well. So that is the end of our strikes today. We need to talk about political stability and these massive layoffs, dismissals, and resignations that have been occurring in Ukraine. So let's go over here as well. I think the most major here is that Ukraine's foreign minister, Dmytro Kuleba, who we've spoken about at length, is said to be being dismissed as well, and the likely candidate is first Deputy Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha. What I will say is Kuleba has been very public. He has had lots of meetings with high-ranking officials. He's been at all the peace conferences. He's been in Africa recently. Very interesting to see if he's actually going to be dismissed, and this is saying from Ukrainian sources that he will be dismissed in here. That is a big, big thing. Now, and if you watch my channel at all, you'll know exactly who Kuleba is. That Zelensky dismisses Sherma from the deputy head of the presidential office. So this guy, deputy head, that he has apparently been dismissed as well. And then we get a little bit more of then who has been dismissed from Kiev Independent. That this has been updated. The deputy prime minister and reintegration minister are submitting a letter of resignation. So there's also dismissals and people resigning. If you've ever worked in something, you know that can be you can be said you may want to resign, so we'll see. But the strategic industries minister, justice minister, ecology minister, deputy prime minister, for Euro and Euro-Atlantic integration, deputy prime minister and reintegration minister. So as you can see, there's a hell of a lot here of resignations, as well as the State Property Fund has submitted his resignation 9 months after being in office. The reasons were not specified. You came out of months of reports of this, and that the People's Party, David Akbar, said the reshuffle would affect more than half of the government staff. So more than 50% in this. He said tomorrow is the day of dismissals and the day after is the day of appointment. So there's a massive reshuffle going on at the moment. Again, during wartime like this, especially when we talk the key elements, vital elements of protracted and attritional warfare, is, of course, political stability and unity and efficiency as well. And this is not only internally, but the relationships formed as well with international partners. And internal dissent will always undermine the war effort at the front. And with Kulaba, the partnerships that he has made around the world as well, and how that will be then affected. So I don't know if this is a cleaning of house to get in more competent, more efficient people, or what exactly has actually gone on here. But again, it's not a great sign at this point. And many have said, is this that members in the government have lost faith in the current serving government? We know Zelensky is at the helm. There's no elections in sight. There's no end to the war in sight. And also Zelensky's government has really tightened down on any opposition. So what is the internal issues here? I'm sure that we may hear of what has happened. So I'll keep my ear to the ground and see if we get any of this. Now, before we look at Pokrovsk, I just want to quickly talk about Mongolia. And I see so much over social media like this, that international law has been buried in Mongolia today. The country as a member of the ICC refused to arrest the world's biggest terrorist on the basis of arrest warrant. The West watches helplessly. Now, one thing we do know is the ICC, they have no way to go and arrest someone. They have limited jurisdiction as well around the world. We've seen, of course, that became very apparent with the warrants put out for Israeli leaders as well. But in defense of Mongolia, look at where this is sitting. It's easy to sit in Europe or America or Australia and be like, oh, you're between China and Russia. You're literally sandwiched in between here. A country of 3.4 million people, entirely dependent on these neighbors. I don't blame Mongolia at all for not arresting Putin. Now, we have here with Politico on Tuesday, the Mongolian government spokesperson said the country finds itself in a position of energy dependence. We know Mongolia has energy problems, rendering it difficult to handcuff Putin on the ICC. Mongolia imports 95% of its petroleum products and over 20% of electricity from our immediate neighborhood, which have previously suffered interruption for technical reasons. This supply is critical to ensure existence and that of our people. Now, what I will say is a leader in a country, no matter where in the world, first and foremost concern should be their people before then looking outwardly. And I think there's a lot of problems around the world with leaders not doing that, but I can't blame Mongolia. Did they have, should have they done this by the letter of the law? Yeah, I guess so if you've signed the Rome Statute. But what does Mongolia look like after this with electricity or relationship with China, Kazakhstan or Russia? Christ. He said, Mongolia has always maintained a policy of neutrality in all its diplomatic relations as demonstrated in our statements of record to date. So again, pretty rock and a hard place. I posted in the Telegram that meme of I'll maybe put it here. You can go and have a look at Telegram. So let's talk about the maps and have a look at a couple of areas, specifically Pokrovsk and Kursk. We're going to look at what Zelensky has said to NBC as well. So here is Ukraine, the center, the capital of Kyiv. The red areas occupied since 2022, the purple since 2014. And the first area we need to come down to is into Pokrovsk. Now, second day, we haven't seen any movement shown on this map, but most other maps, including the Ukraine battle map and other ones, are showing some control in Seladova, as well as pushing into Lizivka and down into Zelene as well. So a lot more control than this one is showing, but I will show you a couple of other maps. But we also need to talk about what I am being told directly from my sources as well in and around this area. So it says here about Pokrovsk. Streets are completely empty. Russian forces now 8 km from the city. Ukrainians appear to be holding the line with extremely heavy bombardments going on now, both in and outgoing. So a hell of a lot of fighting has been occurring here. He's also said Bakhmut level noise as well in this area. So a hell of a lot of intense fighting around Pokrovsk. They are now, the Russians, approximately 2 kilometers from the east-west main service route from Pokrovsk to Konstantinivka. This is the road here. Now, what we will do is we will highlight exactly where this road is. I've already done this on a screenshot so you can get a look, and this is backfilled over another map. So we have this road between Pokrovsk and Konstantinivka, that saying that they are 2 kilometers from here. We have spoken about the problems with this road being cut and then the logistics supply that then runs, of course, down into areas like New York, Donetsk, which I'm sure you're familiar with. So this is said road through this goes up to Konstantinivka here as well. That he's saying that this is 2 Ks from here. Now this map shows it's more, I think it's around 3.8 to 2, but he on the ground is saying 2, so I'll take that. And you can't see exactly on these roads, but this does cut off a logistical way through to Konstantinivka that you'd have to come up through to basically in Kramatorsk sort of region here, if we can just move up a little bit. So up into here before then coming back down on these main roads. And he says that this is a major concern of where that is going. But let's talk about Pokrovsk and some more of the information I've been sent in here as well. So he sends across screenshot. Now I can show all of this, but it's hard to see here, but basically showing arrows pushing down near Osheretne as well, out near to sort of Neteljove and on the flanks of here too. Now, some pages I have seen are saying the reason we're not seeing the same advancement here to the west that we had been seeing in recently is Russia's trying to secure those flanks first. That if the brains at the top can actually figure shit out, the enemy is overconfident towards Pokrovsk and have pushed fast without realizing their vulnerability in terms of logistics. Now is the time to cut off the base of their main supply route, and then they are fucked. This could have been done in Mariupol, Severodonetsk, Bakhmut, Avdiivka, yet the enemy got away with the same tactic time and time again, and the Ukrainian troops were forced to stay and hold the centre while they were encircled. This cannot be allowed to happen again. If so, there should be a mutiny against the incompetent fools running this shit show that are allowing extremely competent soldiers and leaders to be sacrificed and Ukrainian land lost due to decisions by Soviet-minded people. He's talking about at the top that there's really competent sort of mid-level, but there's problems, he's saying, at the very top here, and continues on with a little bit more colourful language. Remember, there as well. Emphasise the fact that those in charge are beyond incompetent, and if they're to win, the cronyism needs to end right now. Promote the majors to senior command position. Those in charge now are utterly clueless to strategic decision-making, and those below them are fucking pulling their hair out. So the top problem, but the mid-level he's saying are really good. Battalion commanders who have had the fucking faith and trust of their men, these are the people who will win this war. Get rid of the 2-tier commanders and replace them with the battalion and brigade commanders, and things will change fast. At the moment, it's a fucking shit show run by buffoons without a clue, saying that this is their last chance and that I am all right to share all of this as well. So what he's saying is the guys, the battalion, brigade commanders on the ground, the sort of mid-level, they've been fighting. They really know what is going on here. They're pulling their hair out from more senior command issues coming down in here. And he's saying there needs to be a shift away from this. Some of those really senior command will be less experienced with smaller units at battalion level because the war's only been going on for 3 years. They would have been in those senior command already and pulling on that a lot of the doctrine is old Soviet doctrine that they're pushing on as well, and that the same thing is happening again and again. This gentleman as well has actually said this when we were back in Avdiivka and Bakhmut. We've known each other for many, many years now. So that is interesting, I think, to look at as well. So let's look at some of the maps and see where some differences are. So we have a Noel Reports map here down Pokrovsk, and of course he's showing Mykolaiivka, Memrik coming under control, and a push down closer to Zeleny Persha than we are seeing on the Deep State map here, but otherwise fairly similar. It's hard to get a grasp exactly where the push into Seledovi is, but if we have a look at where this road then comes out right here, he's saying that it is right up through to this spoil area here, so showing a lot more control around Seledovi than this map. Let's have a look then on the Syriac maps in this area, and this is interesting. So, situation northwest Donetsk City, Russian army enter the localities of Lysivka and Zeleny Persha. So, here we go. Lysivka, we reported live UA map. This is right on this one here. Live UA map showed this about 2 days ago, but he's saying that there is now an entry into Zeleny Persha as well. Further southerly push here. And then showing a massive close-up around Nevelsky, Krasnohorivka area too. Due to the proximity of the Russian troops and the last supply line to the western front of Donetsk city, Ukrainian army began the withdrawal to the west, which allowed the Russian forces to take control of a significant area of the front, which includes the last section of the 2014 defensive line, as well as the settlement of Nevelsky. So you can see he's showing in here that Nevelsky has come under control of the Russian forces, and a lot of this has closed up, including the last 2014 line in here, and that this has moved. We'll wait to see other maps that show this. But he's also said here, after 921 days of bloody warfare, the entire Ukrainian defensive line of 2014 is now under Russian control. And just because some red was shown in here, the defensive line, of course, isn't like smack bang on exactly there. So we'll see how the situation continues to evolve around Pokrovsk and if that can be stopped as well. So no changes shown on Deep State up in Kursk, but we jump across then onto Noel Reports' map, and he does show this advancement just to the northeast of Korenovo out here, but making it further and expanding across this then road that runs to Lgov as well. We've seen movement to this road to Lgov and this road to Lgov then over the past 2 to 3 days. Now, let's have a look at Kursk. We'll show you a map, and I want to look at what Zelensky has said in an exclusive interview. Of course, same map being here. I'm pretty sure I have a Kursk map, sorry, is in the wrong folder for me. Just here, and this shows in front changing in different areas here. Suja axis, Ukrainian army managed to east of Martinyovka, while the Russian army recaptured some positions north of this locality. In addition, Ukrainian forces made small advancement in Raskaya Konopelka. So the best way to sort of do this is work off where we see then these roads. So if we look at where Martinyovka is, that Ukraine did make some advancements out here. Russia took back some ground in here as well, just to the south of here, Raskaya Konopelka, that there was Ukrainian advancement there as well. Now, let's talk more about Kursk and what Zelensky has said about this. An exclusive interview with NBC that he's told NBC that Kyiv is planning to indefinitely hold Russian territories it seized with a surprise incursion last month, saying we don't need their land, we don't want to bring our Ukrainian way of life there. Ukraine will hold the territory as it is integral to his victory plan to end the war, adding he'll present the proposal to international partners like the United States. For now, we need it. So, of course, referring to the land occupied in Kursk. Zelensky said he couldn't discuss whether Ukraine planned to try and seize more Russian territory. Again, I reported in the first days of this that I was being told of separate contacts that Kursk nuclear power plant was where there was to be a push through blitzkrieg up to there. And he says, I will not tell, I'm sorry. With all respect, I can't speak about it. I think the successes are very close to surprise. Now, one of the goals of this incursion was to force Moscow to pull troops across the 600 miles, 1,000k front line in Ukraine, in particular the east. And while he said Russia has diverted some 60,000 troops to Kursk from Ukraine, Pokrovsk has not seen a big drop. NBC News cannot verify this number. I can't verify the 60,000 either. That's the amount of troops it would take to push back the claimed figures of 10 to 20,000 Ukrainian troops in here. But again, with the advancements across many areas of the front line, we can't verify those numbers. With war fatigue growing and Ukraine's struggle to recruit enough manpower to sustain the war, talk of peace negotiations has grown. But Ukraine has insisted it only wants to take part in them from a position of power, which holding Russian territory could help give it. A second peace summit is expected in November. The first was in Switzerland in June. Zelensky told NBC News that representatives from Russia have to be present. That said, coming from a position of power, Ukraine, let's say, occupy 1,000 square k's in here. Let's say they can expand that to 2,000 square kilometers. That is still a large chunk of land. Russia still occupies somewhere in the vicinity of 106 to 108,000 square kilometers. And in those areas in the east still do have the initiative at this point in time. And I think potentially if I were to look forward in November, potentially are still going to hold the initiative or is going into a more defensive part of the war due to the weather conditions at that time, but still there will be the very short memory of Russia having the initiative. He says, we understand that without the Russian side, ending the war diplomatically is very difficult. Multiple Russian officials have already said peace negotiations were impossible after Ukraine's invasion of Kursk. So that came from Sergei Lavrov. He said, now that this has happened, there is no negotiations being able to take place, and that Kursk, regardless, I'm not saying this isn't nothing, but is it going to have Ukraine in a position of power going to negotiations in the short-term time frame? No, it's not big enough to have that. And the positions in here are not as important as other positions. You're not going to swap this for this. You're not also going to swap somewhere like Sudzha for Donetsk or Melitopol or Sevastopol. It's not as important to the overall war as that either. And talking of positions of power, this is from Attritional warfare. The attritional strategy centered on defense is counterintuitive to most Western military officials. Western military thought views offensive as the only means to achieving the decisive strategic goal of forcing the enemy to come to the negotiating table on unfavorable terms. You've got the advantage. The strategic patience required to set conditions for an offensive runs against their combat experience or acquired overseas counterinsurgency operations, where has been working for at least 50 years. The conduct of attritional wars is vastly different from wars of maneuver. They last longer and end up testing a country's industrial capacity. Victory is assured by careful planning, industrial-based development, and development of mobilization infrastructure at times of peace. So how your industrial base can hold, how your logistics can hold, and then how much you can actually mobilize and conscript people as well to fight, but also then come down to your country as a whole and the willingness to fight and sustain prolonged war as well. So unless there's something really major shift here, if there is to be a negotiation in November, by the amount of ground taken and what we are seeing, Ukraine is not going to step into that in a position of power unless really major things then shift. Maybe we will see that, but I don't know. So let's actually have a look at the map. We'll come down to Ugledar, as this is where we see on this deep state map today some changes. So we do have a couple of maps to show you down in here. We actually have two updates from Suryak. So the first one is Suryak. You can see this movement across near Vodiani as well, and movement west near this area. I can't read it due to that map at Breshivka. I can't pronounce it regardless, but you can see this map on day 921, a push through there. Then he has the map on 922 showing just a bit further expansion here as well. The outskirts and new advances towards Vodiani, reaching the southern outskirts of the locality. Moreover, Russia took full control of this area. So control of some more areas in here as well. And again, what this is showing me and what I've spoken to others about is the bypassing, envelopment more of Ugledar as well. Then since this road has fell, it has moved far faster in here as well. So let's go down to Robotny, where we have, of course, these maps show a very, very different picture, as well as a lot of maps show very different images here. And you can see that Suryak is showing a real leveling out of this map. Zap front, during the last 5 days, Russian army took control over new position northeast of Robotny, leveling the front line there. So a good way to have a look here is we can see where this kink in the road is and where this paddock tree line runs down. So basically, and I'm just draw this in really crudely, what this map is showing is basically that this through here has been filled in by the Russian forces. Now we do have geolocations approximately out, if I can draw out in these areas over the past, say, months as well, but of course showing vastly different in these areas of the front. That said, there are other maps that show more similarly to what Suryak is showing than Deep State, including on the Ukrainian side as well. So let's push up a little bit more. We'll go New York Toretsk front in here. No changes shown on this map today, but let's look at the Noel reports map. Now what he is showing is out near Dashan here, and we can see that he's showing more control being made out near Druzhba area, as we have seen over the push the last few days, but not the same amount that I believe even maybe this map is showing here also, but we can confirm there's definitely been some movement there. Let's then have a look on Suryak. So he's showing basically in the same sort of area, but on the other side out from Druzhba that there is a small Russian advancement here, but you can see the difference out from Zelezny as well. So of course we will see what this front has in store. Is there waiting for, I wish these roads you could see better. Is it sort of waiting that once this road comes under at least strategic fire control, that it may be limited supplies into here? Yes, there's still ways through Konstantinivka, but it's going to limit one other major way through here, of course, up into here. Is it waiting for at that point? That's where there will be a further push or grind in here. Again, we will wait and see. But of course, you need to, of course, take into account the amount of train lines as well. You can see this running through here as well that do intersect in Pokrovsk and then come out of here then also. So we'll move just a little bit further up, and then we'll come to Bakhmut, Chasiv Yar. No changes shown on this map for a while now. Syriac does continue to show that there is control into Chasiv Yar itself, with a small piece made here. We know there's a hell of a lot of fighting. To get confirmation on what exactly is happening in there is very, very difficult. Just slightly more north of here, and this is, you'll be familiar with Rozdelivkia and Viminka, where we've spoken about in the last few days and or weeks. Now, Syriac is showing that there is more control in this front, in this Berezene bit. So this is this town right here. He's showing there is some control, and that they're taking over 35% of this locality, looking like the intersection that sits in here too. So saying there is some movement there. Again, I say it a million times, broken record. Wait for confirmation of multiple maps or geolocations till we can confirm movement. Bilharivka front. Now he's saying that Russian army began assault on northern hills of Bilharivka. This area in here, there's so much liquidity at the front line, back and forward. It's constantly moving. Very hard to get a foothold in here. There's so much dead ground due to the mining, and of course then the amount of trees in around the Kremenar area too. Now we'll come up into a Makivka next. So Makivka is an area where it's actually very difficult to know exactly what is going on in the front lines here. So we have a look now, a lot of grey zones shown here. Let's have a look at then what Syriac says. Now Syriac, of course, is showing very different. He's showing that a lot of Makivka, so we see where this road runs, a lot of Makivka is under Russian control, and including a push out south. Now his southerly push here is basically shown as the same here if we take into account this little square paddock. So he's shown here, but he's showing a lot more in the center from previous days and previous updates as well. Anyway, legends, I hope that you have a fantastic day, and I'll speak to you tomorrow. I'm going to go to the dentist and see what sort of poking and prodding they do. Anyway, I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.